And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is December the 12th, 346th day of the year. This 19 days remain to the end of the year. Then we get to start a new year. Holidays and observances. It's Gingerbread House Day. Get creative decorating a tiny edible house. National Poinsettia Day, International Sound Check Day, and National Ambrosia Day. National Salesperson Day, Festival of Unmentionable Thoughts, International Universal Health Coverage Day, National Ding-a-ling Day, Reconnect with loved ones, engaging in heartwarming conversations, International Day of Neutrality, Lost and Found Day. Don't worry when you lose something precious. It might just be waiting for you in that magical world of lost and found. Zagreb Advent, and Advent, of course. Computer Science Education Week. Artes Mundi. Clerk Gallo Day Week. National Hand Washing Awareness Week. And Blue Christmas. Famous people born on this date. Mayim Bialik, Jennifer Connelly, and Frank the Sinatra, the leader of the Rat Pack. Well, on that day, let us see what stories we have in the news, because there's always something going on. Well, a fired Michigan coach, Sharon Moore, is accused of stalking a victim for months in police dispatch audio. Details of the detention of former University of Michigan football coach Sharon Moore surfaced Wednesday, included allegations of stalking and possible mental health crisis. Audio of a 911 dispatch call obtained by Fox News details allegations of an alleged domestic assault, which police said the victim claimed there's a male at the location and the house attacking her. Noted that the suspect had been stalking her for months. The audio goes on to say the suspect did put a knife to his throat and then ran out. According to TMZ Sports, additional audio from dispatch included the suspect's wife saying he's suicidal due to losing his job today. Now, Moore's name wasn't mentioned on the audio, but TMZ Sports reported the call came from a Michigan coach employee's address in Ann Arbor at the time Moore was arrested on Wednesday. And Moore, who was 39, was booked into Washtenaw County Jail in Michigan. Police said they responded to a house as part of an assault investigation. Well, hopefully he will get over whatever his issue is. Well, Ellen Omar's ex appears on Dirty Dandy social account as Trump revives marital siblings claim. Excuse me. Democratic Representative Ellen Omar's second husband has emerged online, referring to himself as a dirty dandy on Instagram while showing off a fun-loving lifestyle in South Africa, according to reports. Ahmed Nur said Elmi, 40 years old, spent time abroad after leaving the U.S., is now believed to be in Johannesburg. Well, he's been chronicling his time there, according to the New York Post. The outlet revealed social media posts showing him wearing a visitor's badge at the University of the Witwatersrand and enjoying upscale venues as he documents his day-to-day life. His reappearance also coincided with President Trump pushing his allegation the Minnesota politician supposedly married her brother to avoid U.S. immigration laws. Well, it must have been in Arkansas because the state motto is vice is nice, but incest is best. Well, President Trump's supporter said she lost a date over Trump. He swears liberals won't date him. Like politicians crash the party scene. Would you date across party lines? That's what Fox News Digital asked party attendees at the conservative-themed Make America Hot Again Christmas party in New York City. According to Dylan, I date a liberal, but a liberal's not going to date me. Rahul, who leans liberal, said he prioritizes values when dating and go out with somebody on the opposite side of the political aisle. As long as the conversations and the discourse can be grounded in logic and rationality, he said, I think the most important thing is moral and ethical values. Like, what are your core values? How are you going to raise a family? What's important to you? Well, a lot of the folks who attended the party worked for various political action groups. One of them, named Paula Scanlon, had a different take. She said one time a guy walked out on a date when he found out she voted for President Trump. She said, just because I work in the political space, I think what I do for work will probably repel people that are liberal. It takes all kinds to make a world. Well, invasive pests have never before been seen in North America that are now threatening the Texas food supply, according to officials. Texas agricultural officials issued an urgent alert this week after confirming that a newly identified invasive pest is spreading quickly across more than 20 counties, threatening grazing land and hay production and livestock operations across the state. This particular insect, Eblicococcus Somerville, known as the pasture mealybug, never before been reported in North America. According to Texas Agricultural Commissioner Sid Miller, the pest is already causing visible damage in multiple regions. I can't talk this morning. This is a completely new pest to our continent, and Texas once again on the front lines. If the pasture mealybug spreads across Texas grazing land like it has in eastern Australia, it could cost Texas agriculture dearly in lost productivity and reduced livestock capacity. Texas Department of Agriculture says it's working with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service to evaluate how far it's spreading and how to determine the best emergency response strategy. There's always something new going on. Well, a California home explosion was caught on a doorbell cam. 6 people are hospitalized in California after a devastating home explosion was caught on video. Footage from a doorbell cam at a home near Hayward in the San Francisco Bay Area showed a property being blown up Thursday, sent debris flying into the air. Sirens could be heard as the fire broke out. One thing about doorbell cams, it gets both audio and video. According to Christian Maldonado, who took the video, it was scary, like a scene from Hollywood. It was unreal. Alameda County Fire Department said 75 firefighters battered the 3-alarm blaze while the explosion and fire left 3 buildings destroyed and adjacent homes damaged. 6 people are taken to local hospitals, and the cause of the incident is now under investigation. So far, they have no new information. Well, DHS has taken a victory lap after arresting over 10,000 illegal aliens in the Deep Blue City despite violent riots. Over 10,000 illegal immigrants, including murderers and kidnappers and sexual predators, have been arrested in Los Angeles since June despite anti-ICE riots and pushback from sanctuary politicians. That's according to the Department of Homeland Security. Agency told Fox News its enforcement operations, which began in June, were a success despite violent rioters who were assaulted during law enforcement, threw rocks and Molotov cocktails at them, and attempted to obstruct lawful arrest of criminal illegal aliens. Well, I'm sure Newsom was leading the attack. Well, archaeologists have uncovered new secrets from final moments of a country's bloodiest battle. Archaeologists recently unearthed a trove of bullets at one of the most iconic battle sites in Scotland, shed light on its final chaotic moments. The finds made at the Culloden battlefield near Inverness in the Scottish Highlands were announced by the National Trust for Scotland October 30th. A group of volunteers and archaeologists found the artifacts earlier that month. The Battle of Culloden took place April 16, 1746, when a Jacobite army led by Charles Edward Stuart, also known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, clashed with King George II's troops. Less than an hour of fighting, the Jacobites were defeated, and all attempts to restore the Stuarts to the British throne were vanquished. Culloden was also the last pitched large-scale battle fought on British soil, cementing its significance in modern British history. Yes, the loss of a battle certainly can change the political atmosphere. Well, Stefanik exposes moral rot at an elite university in an upcoming tell-all book. That's according to a release announcement. Representative Elise Stefanik, Republican of New York, is previewing a soon-to-be-released book she says will expose widespread corruption in higher education. She says the book talks about the moral rot and the academic rot in America's most elite higher education institution. Her new book, called Poison Lives, the inside account of the academic moral rot at America's elite universities, is going to be released in April of next year. Explores what she describes as the decay in America's most prestigious educational institutions. This goes back to the hearing heard around the world a few years ago when we had the former presidents of Harvard, Penn, and MIT testify in front of Congress. I asked one of them a very simple moral question. It's not a political question. It was a moral question. During that 2023 hearing, she asked the Ivy League leaders whether calling for the genocide of Jews violated their school's rules or code of conduct. And one after the other, MIT, Penn, and Harvard presidents said, depends on the context. And the world heard it. It was viewed over 1 billion times and set off an earthquake in higher education. It's led us to this point. Well, a whistleblower has warned that massive fraud is happening in Ohio's Somali community. They said Minnesota is just the tip of the spear. On the heels of Minnesota's still unfolding massive social services fraud scandal, a whistleblower is exposing a similar scheme occurring among the Ohio Somali community, which she says dates back over a decade and totals millions in stolen taxpayer dollars. In an interview with Fox News, Mihek Cook, an Ohio attorney and conservative commentator, said that Minnesota was just the tip of the spear. She said that providers within the Ohio Somali community have confided to her they've been pressured to join a massive Medicaid fraud scheme that involves doctors rubber stamping home health care payouts to the family members of elderly individuals for fake medical conditions. She explained that scammers in the community have been exploiting a loophole in Ohio's Medicaid program, allows individuals to get Medicaid payments totaling as much as $91,000 a year per individual for care they're supposedly providing to family members. And doctors who approve these payments in turn get kickbacks themselves. Well, no matter what the program is, you're going to find somebody who's going to figure out a way to make money off of it. Well, Joy Reid has reposted a viral video calling Jingle Bells. The song that we've all loved over the years is actually racist, as the Christmas Carol now faces new scrutiny. Former MSNBC host Joy Reid took issue with the popular Christmas Carol, posting a video that describes the beloved tune as racist. The now viral clip has renewed scrutiny of the carol's past, as the academic whose research the video is based on says that wasn't her intent. In the video, a man in festive attire stares at a plaque in Bedford, Massachusetts, where James Lord Pierpont is believed to have written what became known as Jingle Bells. Video makes the argument songs' early performances are used to mock black people. Goes on to discuss Pierpont's history using racialized dialect and slurs and other works. Clip also notes that the writer later fought for the Confederate Army in defense of slavery. Well, I would tend to doubt the original intent of that song was racist, but each to their own, I guess. Well, Texas firms and financial giants and startups feel a dramatic shift as the city's average age drops from 45 to under 39. I'm sorry, not Texas firms, tech firms. Good Lord. Business leaders say West Palm Beach is becoming America's next big boom town. It's no longer just a sun-soaked getaway for retirees and winter tourists. It's rapidly become one of the country's most sought-after business destinations. And as tech firms and financial giants and fast-growing startups move in, top executives say the city's lifestyle, tax climate, and talent influx are rewriting Florida's economic identity. And for leaders already investing there, one message to other companies is clear. Come see for yourself. You'll find it's a lot easier than you think. Yes, the Northeast and a lot of the blue cities are losing more than they're ever going to be able to get back, I think. Well, Salvadoran Kilmar Abrego Garcia is seen for the first time since his release. He pledges to continue to fight the Trump administration. He's a migrant, undocumented, and he vowed Friday to continue to fight and stand firm against all of the injustices that the U.S. government has done to him. He said that in his first appearance since being released from federal immigration custody. He appeared for a check-in at a U.S. Immigration Enforcement facility in Baltimore, Maryland, as part of the terms of his release. Yes, one of God's anointed decided that this poor young man needs to be released and possibly given anything and everything he wants to start his life anew. The mere fact he's breaking the law is irrelevant because these judges have to look at the higher meaning behind things. And when you've got senators spending taxpayer dollars to go to another country to talk to an incarcerated deportee, it certainly raises interesting questions. Well, the accused Charlie Kirk assassin, Tyra Robinson, tries to hide from double-edged sword of publicity. The Utah man accused of killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk made his first in-person court appearance Thursday, marking the latest development in the high-profile standoff regarding the trial remaining open to the public. Robinson, who's 22, is charged with aggravated murder stemming from the September 10th shooting of Kirk during a Turning Point USA event at the Utah Valley University campus in Orem, with prosecutors planning to seek the death penalty in the case. Thursday's hearing dealt in part with the issue of cameras in the courtroom, which has been a key aspect of the case so far in a fight over media coverage, which experts said can be a double-edged sword in such a high-profile proceeding. Robinson arrived at the Provo courthouse Thursday with heavy security presence and wearing a dress shirt, tie, and slacks. Wore shackles on his waist and wrists and ankles, and was seen smiling at his teary-eyed mother from when he entered the courtroom. His father and brother are also seated in the front row. Shortly after the proceedings began, State District Court Judge Tony Graff briefly ordered all members of the media out of the courtroom after Robinson's attorney argued the live stream feed was in violation of a previous order barring images of Robinson in shackles. Well, we'll see how they figure out a way to release him, because certainly in America of today, there's very little justice for the wrongdoer. Well, the pickleball player plunged to his death in a 3-story fall after climbing over a safety railing to retrieve the ball. Video shows the moment a pickleball player fell to his death after climbing over a safety rail to retrieve a ball at a sports center in Malaysia. CCTV footage acquired by Newsflare shows the 32-year-old player leaping over a safety rail at a Kuala Lumpur pickleball facility December 2nd. Video then shows him jumping onto the mesh netting that covered an open gap, but it tore under his weight and he fell through, went down 3 stories. Other players rushed to the railing before heading to the first floor. When they got to him, they learned he was dead. There's no comment on whether or not he actually recovered the ball. Well, Stefanik has exposed moral rot, as I said. A lot of student harassment of those who are not vocally anti-Jewish. Now what? Sean Hannity said Democrats are turning a hearing on national security into a circus. And to them, that's what it is. Well, the relationship coach has blamed Oprah for pushing family estrangement for decades. And now my screen just went dark. Hopefully Still broadcasting. I can't tell. Everything has gone absolutely dark. Okay, one more time. There we go. Okay, Oprah Winfrey is shining a light on family estrangement, what she calls one of the fastest growing cultural shifts in our time. One expert says the media mogul helped fuel that very culture herself. Cornell University study now shows almost 1/3 of Americans are actively estranged from a family member. Winfrey made that comment in a recent episode of the Oprah podcast, referring to adult children going no contact with parents and siblings or even entire family systems. She said the trend is a silent epidemic, can be especially relevant during the holidays. But family and relationship coach Tanya Kazal, who focuses on fighting cutoff culture, took to social media to criticize Winfrey for acting as if the estrangement crisis appeared out of thin air. She says now Oprah is shocked by the aftermath of estrangement after being one of the biggest voices pushing it for decades. That comment drew more than 27,000 likes and 3,000 comments. And Oprah's always acted like she is better than anybody else and above everybody else. Well, among the other thing Stefanik revealed was a lot of foreign investment in our top universities. Over $60 billion in foreign funding, and a lot of that pays for the student harassment. Well, the family of a slain Chicago officer is suing the city, says the department ignored warnings about a dangerous partner. She was fatally shot by her partner during a pursuit early this year. Families filed a wrongful death lawsuit alleging the department ignored the clear warning signs that the officer posed a threat to her. The lawsuit was filed by the mother of Officer Crystal Rivera, claims the Chicago Police Department knew Officer Carlos Baker had a history of reckless behavior and violent misconduct before, but continued assigning him to work alongside her. Rivera, who was 36, was shot and killed June 5th while the pair were trying to apprehend an armed suspect. According to the complaint, Rivera had repeatedly expressed concerns to supervisors about Baker's behavior and ended a 2-year on-again, off-again romantic relationship with him shortly before the shooting. The lawsuit also says the department was aware of multiple complaints against Baker, including an allegation from a former girlfriend accused him of threatening her with a gun inside a bar. Well, it takes all kinds to make a world, and sometimes it comes up deadly. Well, the viral footage shows a DoorDash driver allegedly pepper spraying a customer's food order before delivery. This took place in Evansville, Indiana, according to local authorities. The incident occurred early Sunday morning and appeared to be a random attack that reportedly caused a couple excruciating pain. Doorbell camera footage showed a woman with purple hair dropping off an Arby's order, seemingly taking a photo and discreetly spraying the bag with an irritant before slipping the spray back into her jacket pocket and leaving. Authorities have launched a criminal investigation into the incident. We'll see if anything comes of it. Well, and finally, autopsy revealed a Wisconsin grad school student's cause of death after she disappeared walking home from a bar. Her body was found floating face down in the Mississippi River days after she vanished during a walk home from a bar in July. Her name was Elliot Hines. The Lacoste County Medical Examiner's Office ruled her cause of death as drowning and her manner of death as an accident. That's according to the new autopsy report. Well, on that note, let's go talk about our main topic for today. We've been talking about the Kennedy assassination and a lot of the offshoots of that. You know, there's a lot of discussion, I guess you could say, about how it all came about. Because there's been stories for years. Even the Warren Commission, that was supposed to be the final say on who and what led to the death of John Kennedy was actually just a government blessing of Herbert Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover's FBI report. Oswald was a lone nut gunman. Nothing to see here. Move along. Well, that wasn't the case when folks started investigating. It looks like a very focused effort was made on implicating Oswald as a communist sympathizer. And a lot of that was downplayed by the commission. Lyndon Johnson had told Earl Warren, "We cannot make a finding of a conspiracy that would tear the country apart. We can't do anything to make it appear that the communists were involved because that might start World War III. We have to find that Oswald was a lone nut gunman." And with Jack Ruby, they ignored all of his criminal connections. He was definitely involved with the mafia, but that was all downplayed. He was just a man who was upset about the death of the president and didn't want Jackie Kennedy to have to come back to Texas in order to go through a trial. So he thought shooting Oswald would put an end to the whole thing. Well, there's also another interesting issue that I went into some detail in a book I've got coming out called An American Coup, The Assassination of JFK. Turns out Oswald was deeply involved with Cuban exiles. In fact, several times he was seen in meeting with radical Cuban exiles. See, the Castro was ruling Cuba with a firm hand. And a lot of the people who had been exiled by Castro had come to Florida and New Orleans and even Texas. And they were plotting the death of Castro. And in fact, the CIA had organized a number of them into some, well, for lack of a better term, let's call them militias. And it was those militias that led to the Bay of Pigs. Now, part of the issue with the Bay of Pigs was that was a CIA-run operation. And Jack Kennedy had assured the CIA that they would get all the air support they needed. Well, when push came to shove, he did not send the air support. Of course, the Bay of Pigs invasion failed, and a lot of those people were killed or went to prison. Kennedy, of course, was blamed for the failure. There's quite a number of issues that led to his assassination. There were several groups who were very unhappy with the way he did business and the way he ruled the country. There were, in fact, on one instance, the CIA tracked allegedly Oswald to Mexico City, where he went to the Cuban consul and asked for a visa to go to Cuba, and also wanted to let him go to Russia. He also met with members of the Department 13, which was the KGB department that dealt with what's called wet work or assassinations. But the question comes up, was that really Oswald? Now, whether you know it or not, our CIA keeps tabs on who comes and goes at the various consuls. And there's even pictures of the man supposedly Oswald, but it wasn't him. And he was dealing with a lot of members of the exile community, Cuban, even some Mexican. And you might ask why Mexicans got involved in this mix. But Oswald was approached by a group who identified themselves as Mexicans. They may well have been Cuban exiles who came out of Cuba through Mexico, spent enough time there to pick up the clothing and the haircuts and general appearance of Mexicans. And they might even have been of Mexican descent. But the point is, they literally adopted Oswald. He went to a lot of meetings with them. And if you remember, one of the reasons everybody was so sure he was a communist sympathizer is he founded the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. And he was handing out flyers in New Orleans. Now, yesterday I talked about a man by the name of Martino, who was a peripheral member of the assassination conspiracy. And he talked about the interaction of all these groups with Oswald. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of doubt, if you really delve into it, that Oswald was manipulated. And the remarks of Richard Case Nagel and Cuban counterintelligence can be used to trace at least one of the manipulators back to Mexico City, even back to Cuba. They came to New Orleans, actually from Miami, which was a kind of the center of the anti-Cuban movement. A lot of Cuban intelligence sources, after the assassination, did backflips to keep from being implicated with Oswald, and yet there are photographs of them socializing. Now, Richard Case Nagel was a known player in the game, if you want to call it that. He was arrested by the FBI and taken to El Paso, September 20th, 1963. And he said, "I'd rather be arrested than commit murder and treason." He was a decorated Korean War veteran. At the age of 22, was maybe the youngest man to get a field promotion to captain. 1955, he completed the Army Counterintelligence Corps training and was designated the CIC officer, given a top-secret clearance and assigned to Japan. And he served in counterintelligence in Korea and Japan before resigning from the Army. After his separation, he continued to perform as a contact informant for both the CIA and military intelligence. And there's even evidence he worked for the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, which was rather new at that point in time. And as with all intelligence informant relationships, it's impossible to verify. But even the CIA was forced to admit that names found in Nagel's notebook were indeed CIA personnel. And recent research suggests that Nagel's Mexico City CIA contact Bob may have been Henry Heckscher, a CIA officer described as being deeply involved in the alleged conspiracy. Well, keep in mind, if you will, that all this could have come out during the Warren Commission. But Lyndon Johnson, Landslide Lyndon, made it clear that there would be a finding of no conspiracy, lone nut gunman. So there was really no investigation. Even when evidence turned up that showed there had been a conspiracy, it was ignored. Well, now September 20th, 1963, He walked into State National Bank in El Paso about a half hour before closing. Went to the teller window, asked for $100 in American Express traveler's checks. Clerk put him on the counter, and Nagel reached into his jacket and pulled out a Colt 45, aimed it toward the ceiling, and fired 2 shots. Then he put the pistol back on his belt and turned and walked out the front door. Never made a demand for money. After he left the bank, he stopped on the street corner and then walked to his car and waited there. Eventually, he pulled out into the street and was motioned to pass by another motorist. Then he saw a young policeman, backed his car up to the sidewalk, and waited for the officer to approach. The officer came up to his window, and Nagel said, "I guess you got me. I surrender." Well, this sounds like kind of a silly activity. The ramifications of this incident are extensive. Dick Russell talked about him in some detail in a book called The Man Who Knew Too Much. And Russell explored Nagel's activities in '63, legal manipulations he suffered, including the prosecution's frequent recourse to psychiatric examinations to keep him off the stand and off the record, the refusal to provide him with his own possessions confiscated upon his arrest for use in his trial, and his struggle to regain custody of his children, his efforts to communicate what he knew to Congress and various investigations. You see, he knew about the upcoming assassination, and nobody wanted to hear it. The study of the official CIA and Secret Service reports about Nagel reveal a number of untruths and inaccuracies. In some cases, third-party information was presented as fact. And because of this, it's important to examine all the documents in context in order to evaluate their content. It's also true for Nagel's own statements, especially in later years when he's attempting to locate and obtain custody of his children. He was able to successfully maneuver the CIA into actually assisting him in this by leveraging his information and knowledge about Lee Harvey Oswald. Readers who want to evaluate Nagel in detail ought to go read another book called Richard Nagel, Chronology and Documents. But more important for our purpose at this point in time is the fact that Nagel had gone to El Paso from New Orleans. And at his own suggestion, the trunk of his car was examined, and a number of interesting items were found. Unfortunately, the majority of these were never formally entered into the record, and only a few ever returned to Nagel after his conviction for bank robbery was overturned. The items that were found and identified sound eerily like items in the possession of Lee Harvey Oswald. Among those was a miniature Minolta Cameron developing kit, Fair Play for Cuba Committee leaflets, the P.O. Box for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in Los Angeles, and Cuban and communist literature, including The Case Against Cuba by Corliss Lamont. Now, keep in mind, there's also a notebook containing the telephone number of the Cuban Embassy in Mexico City. The same number as found in Oswald's own notebook. And in that same notebook were names of individuals from the CIA's Los Angeles office. These names were submitted to the FBI by the FBI to the CIA in October of '63 and verified as being CIA employees. And while reviewing the legal files for Nagel, Dick Russell found a photocopy of military ID with Nagel's photo, name, and signature of Lee Harvey Oswald. So apparently Nagel was, in fact, pretending to be Oswald. Neither Russell nor attorney Bernard Finsterwald Jr. could ascertain where Nagel could have gotten a copy. After seeing the photocopy, Warren Commission historian Mary Farrell wrote to Finsterwald, "I stress the point this card does not appear in anything else, not the Warren Commission report or the Commission volumes, in no other book, but it's a government ID with Lee Harvey Oswald's information and somebody else's picture." After being charged with bank robbery, Nagel wrote to his sister Eleanor from prison, told her he'd have to accept his conviction due to his own willingness to tell the real story behind his actions at the bank. On November 4th, he filed a writ of habeas corpus and said, "I had a motive for doing what I did, but my motive was not to hold up the bank, and I don't intend to disclose my motive at this point in time. On December 19th, Nagel was interviewed by the Secret Service. Now, there'd been no allegation at that point in time that he was involved in anything the Secret Service would have venue over. No reason was given for the interview. Nagel stated only he had sent a note to the Secret Service on the afternoon of November 22nd. The FBI agent involved investigating and prosecuting Nagel's bank robbery charge accompanied the Secret Service agents on November 19th to the interview. And for that reason, Nagel refused to make any comments beyond stating he had met Lee Oswald in Mexico City before the assassination. January 1st, 1964, Nagel provided a statement to the FBI he'd been approached by foreign agents in Mexico City as well as by an American working for a foreign government. He cited those contacts, his resulting activities, and subsequent coercion as being the factors behind his actions at the bank. Well, the next day he wrote to the chief of the Secret Service protesting the FBI's participation in his interviews. Agent Fred Morton of the FBI filed a report stating Nagel had accused him of violating Nagel's civil rights and advised that from that point on, Nagel would not be interviewed alone. Well, this interview resulted in a Secret Service summary report that listed some items of Nagel's property. First 2 pages of that document are missing from the documents available at the archives. They apparently contained the full evidence list that, of course, should be extremely supportive of Nagel's statements. Secret Service reports, the first of several that contain inaccurate information. It states Nagel fought with the arresting officer during the escape attempt. The arresting officer himself said that didn't happen. And from that point on, the investigation of Nagel and his claims became very murky. He stated he'd written a warning letter to J. Edgar Hoover describing an action against the president being planned for the Washington, D.C. area in September. And historically, we do know there were apparently several planned assassination attempts leading up to the Dallas trip. Hoover didn't respond to that letter. A special agent Robert Jameson of the Secret Service interviewed Marina Oswald about Nagel on January 20, 1964. She said the FBI had already talked to her about Nagel, but there's no record in the FBI files mentioning that. One instance which might explain her remark could have been FBI agent James Hosty's questioning of Marina on November 27th, assisted by the Russian-speaking Secret Service agent Leon Kapadze. He'd been sent to Dallas to interview Marina and act as translator for Hosty and fellow FBI agent Charles Brown. At the conclusion of the interview, Kapadze continued with a short list of his own questions, some of which didn't make it into the record. According to author Dick Russell, the FBI hadn't yet seen fit to open his full Nagel file to public scrutiny. Well, judging from oblique references made in the Secret Service record on Nagel, the CIA hadn't been forthcoming with all this Nagel pages either. Well, Agent Kapadze followed with another interview the next day, November 28th, accompanied by Paul Gregory, a member of the Dallas Russian community who met Lee and Marina Oswald in 1962. One of the recorded questions about whether or not Marina had any knowledge of Lee's trips to Mexico and Washington. This is revealing because Nagel would later recount that Lee Oswald had been recruited by 2 anti-Castro exiles representing themselves as Castro agents. Nagel was privy to some of their discussions, and the plan that was presented to Oswald at that time involved an action in Washington, D.C. in September 1963. The FBI questions seemed to be a solid corroboration for Nagel's letter and story. And an additional corroboration came from letters Oswald wrote about his planned move to the Northeast at the end of August of 63. Following a letter on August 28th to the Communist Party USA asking whether or not he ought to go underground on August 31st, he wrote to the managing editor of The Worker, the official Communist Party USA newspaper, and offered his services as a photographer since he was planning to move into your area. September 1st, he wrote 2 more letters, one to the Communist Party USA and one to the Socialist Party USA. Both asked for instructions on how to contact the representatives as he's planning to move to the Baltimore-Washington area. Clearly, this was an impressive and quite deliberate paper trail, although the ideologies of the 2 parties was very much at odds, and a sincere adherent to either one would be unlikely to approach the other. If Oswald had been associated with some action in Washington, there would have been a clear link between Oswald and Marxist organizations. And combining this with his public demonstrations in support of Castro makes it easy to imagine the headlines after such an incident. Certainly, there was a whole lot more going on than we've ever been told. The FBI questions from Marina asked before Nagel's first documented meeting with the Secret Service and what the FBI in attendance suggested either Nagel's letter or some other information concerning Nagel to Oswald was in the FBI's possession. Nagel himself didn't openly mention the Washington, D.C. matter and the Hoover warning letter until 1975, when he wrote to Congressman Edwards, head of a congressional committee investigating Dallas FBI agent Hosty's post-assassination destruction of a note from Lee Oswald to the FBI. Nagel had made general reference to FBI in action, but supposedly had only privately described the Hoover letter to his sister and her husband, who were holding some of his belongings for him. In their turn, they told Dick Russell a copy of the letter to Hoover was among the items missing from their home the day after a team of FBI agents visited him in 1964 wanting to examine Nagel's belongings. They requested the letter copy, but they were refused by the agents. They said, "We're sure the FBI broke into our house that night to find out what he knew." Well, there was a whole lot more going on throughout this entire time than ever made it into the official records. The planned Washington incidents further confirmed by a conversation between Lee Oswald and a young woman who was accompanying her mother on a visit to Marina Oswald. Ruth Payne had written to a New Orleans friend, Quaker group, searching for somebody who could assist Marina, and the girl's mother was serving as a volunteer in their organization. That led to the visit. Now, if you remember, Ruth Payne was the one that got Oswald the job at the book depository, according to the records. Oswald began a conversation with the girl and remarked he planned to travel to the D.C. area. When she asked him for the purpose of the visit, he appeared a little bit flustered and finally remarked he's going there to get a gun. March 20th, 1964, Nagel sent a letter to J. Lee Rankin of the Warren Commission. "I informed the Federal Bureau of Investigation in September 1963 an attempt might be made to assassinate President Kennedy. Was the commission advised that the day before Mr. Kennedy visited Dallas, I initiated a request through jail authorities to the FBI, asking they contact the Secret Service in order to inform them about that same information. The commission apparently did not respond to this letter, and there's no evidence of Richard Case Nagel is contained in any of the 26 volumes of the Warren Commission. His personal saga would continue for a number of years. Although he objected, he wasn't allowed to speak in his legal defense, and his court-appointed lawyer pursued an insanity defense that ended up on the court record, which, of course, tainted Nagel's information about Oswald. May 5th, Nagel was tried and convicted in the court of Judge Homer Thornberry. The judge, who was a longtime friend of President Johnson, ridden in a Dallas motorcade, flown into Washington, D.C. on Air Force One, and spent the evening and the next few days after the assassination at Johnson's home in the new president's company. Within a relatively short time after his involvement in the Nagel legal actions, John Thornberry was nominated for a seat on the U.S. Supreme Court of Appeals by President Johnson. Judge Thornberry had been a Texas congressman until the fall of '63, when he resigned his House seat to join the federal bench for West Texas, a post granted as part of the Texas patronage allowed to Vice President Johnson by President Kennedy. Well, another of Johnson's appointments to the Supreme Court successfully confirmed Dave Fortas on the nation's highest judicial body. Fortas had been serving as legal counsel for the notorious Bobby Baker before leaving him to become part of Johnson's inner circle. Abe Fortas was among the first people Johnson telephoned in the days after the assassination and was assigned responsibility to coordinate all the assassination investigations for the new president. Because if you remember, Johnson took firm control of the entire investigation to the point of anything he didn't approve didn't appear in the public record. Fortas' term on the Supreme Court bench was relatively brief. He was forced to resign over a scandal involving payments from a criminal appearing before the court. Judge Thornberry's remarks in the Nagel case talked about the roles of Johnson and Fortas and events after the assassination. During Nagel's trial, they engaged in a heated exchange with his lawyer over the process. He said, "The real reason I didn't leave the country at the time was not because of my love for the U.S., but because of my children, who at that time were quite young. If I'd been allowed to take my children with me, I would have taken them, but the circumstances were such at the time that I was told, because I was not leaving the country through legal channels, I couldn't take my children with me. Well, after sentencing, Nagel protested vigorously. Why weren't the real issues brought out in court? They're going to come out sometime. And absolutely, he was correct. Now, his attorney hadn't been interested in any defense beyond an insanity plea, who apparently had the court. Indeed, the sentence rendered by Thornberry is really rather strange. It specified that the sentence was conditional. Nagel might be released at any time based on a parole board's decision. It would appear it offered Nagel a deal if he decided to shut up. Or he refused to shut up and paid with years in prison and federal medical institutions. According to his sergeant, he wanted to do things the right way, by the book, all the time. And he paid for it. In 1968, after Nagel begun providing information to D.A. Garrison in the New Orleans investigation, and that was through a Garrison volunteer investigator who later was determined to have a history with the CIA, Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, to which Judge Thornberry had recently been appointed, overturned Nagel's conviction on the legal issue that no intent to rob had ever been demonstrated. But the court also chose to add its own comment, and Nagel was very likely not mentally competent at the time, which would tend to call into question anything he had to say about the conspiracy to assassinate the president. Based on the previous court history of an insanity defense forced on Nagel by his court-appointed lawyer, his follow-up decision provided the court with the basis for this to dismiss Nagel's retrial petition. Certainly another trial, one with implications for the Kennedy assassination, would have received considerable media attention if it had gone to court during the Garrison investigations. Only after all possibility of further legal action had been eliminated was some of Nagel's personal possessions returned to him. These had been taken into custody when he was arrested and continued to refuse to him for use in his defense. Now, some were returned to him, some were not. He was never able to bring legal attention to the actual motivation and circumstances behind his action in the El Paso bank. Now, what I know about the legal system here in El Paso, the good old boy system runs rampant. And if somebody didn't want him to talk about anything, the word in the right ear would have made sure that didn't happen. He was forced against his will to take a court-assigned counsel who focused all efforts on the defense of insanity in spite of the fact that there was no evidence whatsoever to support the formal charge of robbery, as was eventually verified by the appeals court. As to the validity of his lawyer's strategy, Nagel's lawyer would tell Dick Russell 20 years later he never explored any aspect of the case other than the insanity defense. He said although they found him with some paraphernalia, freedom for Cuba, and similar to some of that stuff the guy Oswald had, but that's only similarity. Now, if you could establish that he was in Mexico City, you'd have a different story. Of course, Nagel had most definitely been in Mexico City. That's where he met two radical Cuban exiles who were members of Alpha 66 and were busy conducting actions against Cuban embassy staff in Mexico City, including bombing attacks against embassy facilities. These same two men would later monitor and consider recruiting Vaughn Snipes, an ex-Marine Fair Play for Cuba Committee activist in Los Angeles, for an attack on President Kennedy. One of these same two men appeared to establish contact with Lee Oswald in New Orleans in the summer of 1963. Well, Oswald was associated with a variety of Cubans in the summer and fall of 63, and his activities made him visible to exile groups and individuals in both New Orleans and Miami. Martino remarked that certain exiles approached Oswald and led him to believe they were Castro agents and they were looking for Oswald's cooperation. These individuals were actually not part of the visible exile movement unknown in New Orleans, but they did match the description given by Sylvia Odio of the two men who came with Oswald to her house. Both Otesto Pena and Carlos Bringuier reported numerous suspicious newcomers to New Orleans to the FBI. The newcomers were suspected of being communist spies. Orestes Pena and others observed Oswald in the company of an unknown Latin who was not very prominently making communist-type remarks. Dean Andrews observed Oswald in the company of a Mexican-looking individual matching the description given by Sylvia Odio. Nagel reported one of these individuals had come from Mexico and had been affiliated with the Alpha 66 organization there. And Nagel independently reported Oswald in association with exiles presenting themselves as pro-Castro agents and was unable to get Oswald to break the contact. And Nagel reported that while in New Orleans in August, these individuals recruited Oswald for an action against President Kennedy in the D.C. area in September. The assassination in Dallas was not the first planned action, but it was from their point of view, the only successful action that took place. Now, there's clearly evidence and corroboration for Martino's contention that Oswald was approached by individuals presenting themselves as Castro's agents, and to at least some extent, Oswald was cooperating with them in late August. As far as John Martino knew, this was the genesis of the conspiracy that led to the assassination in Dallas. But based on verifiable information from Richard Nagel, it's very possible that the concept behind the Dallas plot was many months older than that. Oswald was not the first candidate for the role of pro-Castro patsy. I think the ID card with Nagel's picture and Oswald's information was certainly telling, because it made it clear. When you show a military ID, whoever you're showing it to, of course, takes for granted that's you. So, especially when the card has your picture on it. So somebody taking activity that would be treasonous, but showing a military ID card, would certainly support the premise that Oswald was in fact pro-communist. And on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow. And once again, we'll be talking more about the assassination of President Kennedy and some of the strange shenanigans going on in the background and our government covered up. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.